Welcome, Julius.
Yeah, I hope everybody can hear me. Thank you so much for this warm welcome. Can everybody see the? Oops, sorry. Can everybody see the presentation full screen right now? Right? Okay. Yeah, thank you to the INEX team and especially Leila for this amazing opportunity to present our work. I'm very excited to present this. It's the first time that we're presenting this on a broader scale, wider scale, especially since as Leila mentioned, I just arrived in Vienna for the summer. So if one of you is in Vienna and of course COVID will allow it, I would love to meet up in person as well. And again, also thanks to free testing in Vienna, I just tested negative this morning in the Schloss Schönbrunn, and I'm looking forward to exploring the city. But on more serious topic, I would like to welcome you to my talk named "The Impact of Racist Political Campaigning on Minorities and Migrants: Evidence from the US and Canada." What I'm presenting here is part of a larger international research project that is currently focusing on the US and Canadian context. However, we also hope to conduct similar research in the European context, and in particular in states with much more regressive citizenship regimes like Austria or Germany. And this is work I'm working on this research with Randy Basco, Sergio Garcia Rios, Nazita Lajevardi, Kasra Oskoi, and Aaron Tolley. So what is all this about? There has been a far-right shift in politics, and Leila mentioned the two other talks that are upcoming will focus on populism, and that has been happening around the globe. And far-right campaigns have found a quote-unquote new scapegoats, immigrants and ethnic minorities. I say new because we all know that they've been scapegoated for centuries already. So but in particular with the influx of immigrants across Europe and the US, this has further led many dominant, almost always white group members to adopt exclusionary attitudes toward immigrant populations. I do want to go over some of the examples from Austria and Germany in particular, since this talk is placed technically in Vienna, even though everybody's watching. So here I'm focusing on some campaign videos and campaignings that the FPÖ have been doing. This is from last year. This one stated, while you're watching this video, thousands of illegal immigrants are crossing the Turkish-Greek or Turkish-Bulgarian border while showing pictures of people of color in a demonstration. Others are, there's others. This one is saying, immigrant suffrage, inheritance tax, UN Migration Pact, multi-culti, mass migration, Islamization. And again, this is from an FPÖ campaign video for the national election 2020, heavily implying that these are the things that would happen without the FPÖ in the coalition government. And last but not least, they also do this for international, like for European elections. Turkey becomes part of EU. Islam is fastest growing religion in Europe. Merkel happy, all borders open. And this is an FPÖ campaign video for the European Parliament election 2019. And they're basically hypothetical headlines for if the left had won the European Parliament election. So while we could argue that these are almost subtle, not as like directly racist or xenophobic attacks, there are other parties that are much more direct. So for example, the AfD just a couple of weeks ago, in fact, broadcasted this advertisement, which said, looting and beating up police officers, the government calls this party scene. We don't. The AfD is against unqualified mass immigration. Migrants without prospects of staying have to be returned consequentially. This is especially true for offenders, extremists, and integration refusers. This is from the state campaign in Baden-Württemberg in Germany in March this year. And this is also the picture that they used in the video while narrating what I said above. And as you can see, it's depicting mostly darker people, men of color with beard, in a destructive scenery, which probably is supposed to be the city center of Stuttgart. So social media and constant TV entertainment distribute these messages wildly. Right? Racist and xenophobic political advertisement reaches everyone, also immigrants and ethnic minorities themselves. While there has been a great deal of scholarly interest in this topic, much of research looks at how anti-immigrant messages trigger a political response among majority group members or white members. As a result, political scientists have developed a firm sense of the factors behind native opposition to immigration and its situational triggers. In comparison, relatively less is known about how immigrant and their co-ethnics psychologically process and react to generalized or particularized xenophobic attacks. Oops. So for us, the research question that we wanted to ask is, how does racist campaigning affect the addressees themselves? So we aim to study this dynamic. We identified two different groups that are often attacked: immigrants and then also specific ethnic groups. We're interested in this paper in whether immigrant-based groups react differently to xenophobic appeals that generally target immigrants as to opposed to those that target their ethnic group in specific. To be more concrete, in our case, we want to identify if general immigrant attacks trigger a different response from an attack that is targeted towards Latinos in the US context, or South Asians in the Canadian context, representing both the largest ethnic minority groups in both countries. So in general, we ask if racist campaigns mobilize members of minorities and or immigrants, or will it lead to alienation and disengagement? We are also interested in analyzing the heterogeneous effects of such attacks as it pertains to the difference between foreign-born immigrants and their native-born co-ethnics. Again, as an example, immigrants from Mexico would be foreign-born immigrants, while US residents born of Mexican origin would be Latino co-ethnics. So, like, technically they are distinct group, but they come from they're coming from the same source. That is, whether we ask whether broad anti-immigrant appeals affect native-born minorities as deeply as their foreign-born co-ethnics who are closer to the immigrant experience. So the idea being, is there a difference between how native-born and how foreign-born minorities perceive of immigrant-focused attacks? Another way to ask this question is whether both generalized xenophobic attacks, such as those focused on the immigration problem, and particularized attacks that single out one's own group, Latinos or South Asians, tap into what we call neighboring identities to produce similar or distinct psychological reactions and political judgments. So we're not working in a vacuum, obviously. There has been some work has been done on this already in terms of what we would expect in terms of result. So a large set of the literature suggests that such discriminatory campaigns could have a mobilizing effect, actually, to counteract the racist attack. This comes from Link Fate, the literature, policy threat literature, and discrimination suggests exactly that it can actually mobilize minorities. However, in particular, surrounding Trump, more recent literature in the US-American context suggests the opposite effect of racist rhetoric. And last but not least, my co-author Kas Roskoy found that the type of discrimination matters as well. political discrimination seems to motivate formal political participation, while societal exclusion tends to dampen it, which I think is very important for what we're looking at here. So it is quite open at this point if this type of discriminatory campaigning in or decreases political participation. The sub-question that we are asking for this, that I'm asking for this presentation in particular is, do immigrant-based groups react differently to xenophobic appeals that target immigrants as opposed to that target their ethnic group in specific? Studies have shown that immigrant status has become one of the key factors in the racialization of native-born co-ethnics. Also, native-born Latinos recognize that they share similar challenges and status with their foreign-born counterparts. And anti-immigrant context can heighten the political participation of both native and foreign-born Latinos. So again, this is very US focused, which is also one of the reasons why we want to test this in other contexts, and did so in Canada as well. So what we argue is that members of what we call neighboring identities react very similarly. Given this, we hypothesize that vague or generalized anti-immigrant attacks, and particularized ethnic attacks, will be seen similarly objectionable by immigrant-based groups as they tap into neighboring identities. When it comes to non-white immigrant-based populations, we argue that shared experience of exclusion and stigmatization and allows for neighboring identities to emerge. Native-born minorities will, while removed from the immigration experience per se, because they didn't go through it, are often reminded of their outsider status and treated as perpetually foreign, famous from Kim 1999. This outsider status is often reinforced through acts of microaggressions that undermine their sense of belonging by simple questions such as, but where are you really from? And if this is the case, it will be manifested in form of similar psychological, emotional, and political judgment reactions to both types of xenophobic attacks among native and foreign minorities. We also think that this will be particularly true in the European context. Just to give you an example from what I was working on, I remember analyzing an open-worded question in the German GSS, the Albus, in their 2016 survey, where they asked all respondents which group they would associate with the term immigrant or foreigner the most. And by far, the largest share of first responses, like almost 70%, if I remember it correctly, was Turkish or the Turks. So even though many Germans of Turkish origin have lived all their life in Germany, and some for generations, their group is still seen as foreign, as different, or as other. I have not seen similar data for Austria yet, but given the situation, I would assume that it's very, very similar. So what we think is our main contributions are at this point is most studies on anti-immigrant context have relied on cross-sectional data centered on the US among Latinos and mainly considered mobilization, information seeking, and candidate choice. But we also want to see if, like, does subtleness matter? They have not, none of them have yet not examined whether generalized focus on immigrants broadly and particularized attacks focus on one specific group elicit similar reactions among foreign and native-born co-ethnics. Lastly, we assess the reactions to the devaluation of neighboring identities among two groups, Latinos and South Asians, in a comparative context, US and Canada, with experiments. So what did we do? We conducted several survey experiments with different groups in different countries, again, so far Canada and US. We conducted an online survey experiment with a political campaign video It contained 2 treatments and 1 control. The treatment 1 was a campaign video targeting immigrants generally. And the treatment 2 was a campaign video targeting a specific ethnic group, Latinos in the case for the US, and South Asians in the case of Canada, again, both representing the respectively largest immigrant and ethnic minority group. We also made a video as a control group, which is a campaign video targeting the state of the economy generally. We had thought about leaving the control empty, but then again, what we're interested in is the effect of different types of campaign videos, and not so we added this as a control. If you have better ideas of like what a better control could be, that would be incredibly helpful. Just some summary statistics here. In the US sample, we had 1,320 Latinos, of which 75% were native born. We conducted this with DNATA, and in Canada, we had 818 South Asian or self-identifying South Asian respondents, of which 30% were native born. So we see like there's a little bit of a skewness in the samples, but I'll come back to that. So what did we actually do? First, when we about how we could do this, we thought of only doing text, but what we also thought that might not be strong enough or not real enough. Then we thought of hiring actors and doing something larger, but then realized that we completely lacked the editorial skills to do that. So what we did is what we call a YouTube style campaign videos for the US and the Canadian context. What do you mean by YouTube style? Basically, we did what in the end most campaigns actually do, which is you get together snippets from online, like pre-filmed snippets that you can then underline with your own wordings and own own messages. So we first got music from royalty free. There are a lot of websites out there, and the cost was around $20 for every license. We also got images and video clips. Again, a lot of websites out there. We got most of ours from Getty Images, and the license was similar. The most expensive part were voice actors that we hired, because we didn't want to do that part ourselves. Like, as you can hear, I have an accent, and that wouldn't have been much helpful. So we got like very neutral voices that we hired from Fiverr.com and paid between $20 and $50 for each actor. And we also decided to use multiple actors, one for the narrator, one for the candidate, and also, for example, like the concerned citizen voice, which you will hear in a bit. Important note on the script that we developed ourselves. We did not need to pay royalty for that. And I will get to that a little on the next slide as well, because I think I want to say some things about that as well. So before I go into the video section, because I will show you the one treatment and one control, I do want to emphasize that we recognize that some of this content is offensive. And we also want to emphasize that none of the things said in the video represents our own politics. However, we do think that this is an understudied and important research, so we try to be as ethical as possible, but while at the same time staying as real as possible, because this is actually something that people of color and other minorities are exposed to every day around the world. So to make sure that our treatment was quote unquote real, we only used actual statements used by politicians, mostly from campaign videos, but only things that they said in public about minorities, be it either immigrants generally or South Asians or Latinos in particular. So what we think is helpful is speaks for us is that no respondent actually ended the survey after the video section. And so we feel positive about the fact that it wasn't too harsh of a treatment. We did not associate the video with a real candidate or even a region, district, office, or party organization. Instead, we only contextualized the country. So we said, this is for like the US or this is for Canada. We had an extensive debriefing at the end of the survey with a clear statement that the video is fictional. And at the end of the survey, correct information about related issues, such as the actually lower crime rates of immigrants is also provided. Last but not least, the research received institutional review board approval at the University of Toronto. So we had institutional background there as well. Okay, so now we come to the video treatments. Just again, to remind you, we had 2 treatments. The first one is a blank anti-immigrant campaign, and then we had a second treatment where always the word immigrant was replaced by either South Asians in the Canadian and either South Asians or Latinos in the US American context. So otherwise, the video treatments themselves are identical. The control treatment is slightly different because it contains basically a bleak drawing of the state of the economy. I hope this will work now. Again, this might be offensive for some, so be warned. I'm going to try to share this now.
Sometimes I look around and I don't recognize my own community. Immigrants. They don't speak English. They don't understand how we do things here.
Immigrants keep coming, thousands every year. Many don't have any documents, but just say asylum, and they're let in. Costs are skyrocketing. Too many immigrants on welfare. They're collecting free benefits that should be going to hard-working taxpayers. Now crime is rising. Break-ins, knife attacks, immigrant gangs.
I don't want to be a foreigner in my own country. We need to do something now.
John Stevens will protect our community.
If these people don't accept our values, we should send them back. We need to focus on helping ordinary, hardworking Americans. This is our country, and we're taking it back.
Vote for John Stevens, the candidate for Real Americans.
Okay, so this was the video for immigrants, and again, the second treatment would have been exactly the same video, except that instead of the word immigrant, it would use the word Latinos or South Asians, respectively. This is our control video. I hope this works just as well.
John Stevens, the candidate for American jobs.
Things have been so bad these last few years, and prices keep going up. I want to give my kids a good life, but it's hard to make ends meet. It's been really tough on us.
We need to protect our economy. Even if you have a job, you never know if it's going to last. Debts keep piling up. Taxes are higher. People can't find jobs, and even when they do, the jobs pay less.
This has to stop. We need to do something now.
John Stevens will protect our economy and bring in new jobs.
We need to focus on helping everyday Americans. People who work hard deserve good-paying jobs. It's time to kickstart the economy and get Americans back to work.
Vote for John Stevens, the candidate for American jobs.
So these are the 2 treatments, just for the record. Of course, for the Canadian sample, we used Canada instead of the US. We also had several other treatments constructed. In the end, we had, I think, 18, and we ended up using those like 3 times 2, 6 treatments. This I just have for backup in case the sharing wasn't going to work. So I want to talk a little bit about the outcome measures that that we are using now to show how these are our respondents are being affected. So we looked at negative and positive emotions towards the ad, which the questions were like, did this make you sad? Did this make you angry? As opposed to hopeful and enthusiastic. The other section was we wanted to know more about candidate traits. Do you think that candidate Stevens is honest, hardworking, or whether the candidate cares about people like you, and whether the respondent would consider voting for the candidate Stevens. And response applied on a 5-item Likert scale. And again, we're not so much in like these seem kind of like it seems obvious in which direction the treatments are supposed to be drawing, but we are more interested in the difference within. And I hope this will be a little bit clearer when I show you the results. So here we look at only the emotional reactions of Latinos in the US. So what we did is we ran several linear OLS regressions with the emotion as the dependent variable here, and we controlled for gender, level of education, income, age, Mexican origin, and English language abilities and political interest. And I want to clarify, like the findings that you're finding here are not contingent on these controls. We also just did simple t-test evaluations, and it looked very similar. We also tried a lot of different combinations. This is just to show, like, even when we control for all of these potential confounders, we find the same results. So what you're seeing here is the relative coefficient size of the treatments, right? So the treatments, we said we turn the treatment into a factor variable, and the baseline, as you can see here, is the economic condition. So what this means is basically this is the size of the treatment, the average treatment effect, compared to our control economic video baseline. And every blue line represents the results of the treatment effect for the immigrant treatment. So this one and this one are the people who got the immigrant video. And the red line represents the results for the Latino treatment. So this line and this line represents all respondents who received the Latino, so like the identity-specific treatment. In addition to that, we were interested in the idea of like immigrants with an own immigrant experience versus native-born co-ethnics, and that's why we also distinguish native-borns and foreign-borns. So there's a lot of things going on here. This represents, I think, 16 different regressions, but we tried to summarize them as crisp as possible. So what can we see here? What you can see here is that all treatments go in the direction that we would suspect them, right? So respondents who got the Latino or immigrant treatment both reported higher degrees of sadness, were more angry, were less enthusiastic, less hopeful, right? But what is interesting for us is that it almost doesn't matter if you got the Latino treatment or the immigrant treatment. And we think that, and even more so, for native-born, this doesn't matter, and for foreign-born, this doesn't matter, right? So like we would have the corresponding, so the quote-unquote corresponding foreign-born treatment would be immigrant, and the corresponding treatment for native-borns would be Latinos. And we can see there's basically no difference between the treatment. I'll go a little bit more into detail between the actual treatment a little bit later. More so, and the picture looks very similar for South Asians in Canada, right? So again, again, the blue line represents those who received the immigrant treatment. and these are the native-born South Asians. These are the foreign-born South Asians. Here the controls are exactly the same, except that we have Indian origin as an additional control and not Mexican as an origin. And again, this is the treatment effect as compared to the baseline, which is the economic treatment, the second video that we just saw. And again, here we see very little difference between how native-borns react towards the South Asian specific treatment and the immigrant treatment. And against the similar thing here, foreign-born as well. So now we come to the candidate perception and voting for Stevens. Unsurprisingly, what we can see, this is again going back to the Latino sample, neither people who were treated are more likely to vote for Stevens than those in the economic control treatment. But we do see a little bit more movement here. As you can see, there seems to be a bias towards Latinos actually perceived the Latino treatment as worse, just a little bit, but worse than the immigrant treatment. So there seems to be something going on. This could also be related to this is from 2019. This could be related to the place, to the fact that this was kind of like a lot of people said this was a Trump advertisement. So maybe this also played a major role here. And we don't see this in the foreign-born sample. Here, again, the Latino attack was basically the equivalent as the immigrant attack. And again, we also don't see large differences in the South Asian sample. We see that native-borns react basically the same, regardless of if they receive the South Asian treatment or the immigrant treatment. And similar for foreign-borns. Surprisingly, actually, if you want to say there is a tendency, they actually tend to react more harshly to the South Asian treatment than to the immigrant treatment. Yes. So this is what this is the last result slide that I wanted to get at. What I also wanted to highlight, these are representing the differences between treatment 1 and the treatment 2. So what you saw before was the difference of treatment 1 and treatment 2 compared to the control. And now we wanted to get at what's the statistical difference between the two treatments, right? And again, and this time I also included the full sample, but and we can see slight changes here. But what's more important is that the native-born, these results seem to be mostly borne by the native-born Latinos, right? So a negative value here indicates that the Latino treatment was actually stronger for Latinos who were born in the US. And we don't really see this here in the sample of foreign-born Latinos. We don't really see any movement in our South Asian sample in Canada. Here again is the full sample, and we see a little bit here, but this might just be an exception in this case. But we we don't see the same we don't see the same movement. But what we can generally say is that for immigrants and ethnic minorities who origin from immigrant groups, the type of attack almost doesn't matter. There's no subtleness, right? You can they know exactly who you're talking about when you're talking about immigrants. They're not talking about a white German. They're talking about me as a Latino person or as a South Asian person, So what do you think we can learn from this is that there's both broad and particularized attacks appear to tap into neighboring identities. Whether immigrants or South Asians and Latinos are the object of critique makes little, in Latino case it does a little bit, to no difference in eyes of foreign-born and native-born co-ethnics. these are quasi-interchangeable attacks. So for me, or for us, the big question is, does this transfer to European nation states? Here, the new ethnic groups are even more associated with foreign, right? So I would actually expect that we would see even more similar similar effects in, for example, if we were to do this in Austria or the German context. So what we would love to hear from you in particular is, besides this, what are additional problems or things we should focus on if we were to do something like this in the Austrian or the European context? So we'd love to hear that from you. But generally, we would love to hear whatever thoughts you want to share on this piece, and we'd love to hear your feedback. So thank you very much for your time, and feel free, even if the time doesn't feel free to contact me with further questions or comments. And again, thank you for tuning in.
Thank you so much, Julius, for this really fascinating talk, and I especially liked it explained the method and the approach very well. So it's really traceable what you did in this project. So thanks again. I would stop the recording now so that all of you